Nightwalker. In the late hours of the night, two scientists, Leonard and Ivan, were having a discussion about ghosts. They both believed that although ghosts were very intimidating, they could not exist. Ghosts are one of the hardest things to prove or disprove because many people claim they have seen them while others have never had that experience. I think we can get the funding for a little experiment if we can find a way to disprove that ghosts exist, Leonard declared. All we need is a few volunteers. We can have them stay a full month at one of the most haunted castles in the world. Ivan raised an eyebrow as if questioning Leonard's motives. What happens if you can't find any volunteers? It doesn't seem like people would want to sign up for something that could be potentially fatal. If they don't believe in ghosts, then they have nothing to fear, Leonard retorted. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out a piece of paper, and handed it to Ivan. Do you know what this is? I call it Plan B. It is a list of prisoners. Now, we're not talking maniacs, just people with short records and no history of insanity. In fact, they each have been sentenced to a term of 6 months in jail. All the people on this list have been checked out. Ivan leaned forward and slowly took the list from Leonard's hand. He was hesitant. His gaze shifted all around the room as he contemplated Leonard's proposal. Several minutes later, he laid the list down and spoke quietly. What if something goes wrong? Why would these prisoners even want to agree to this experiment? Leonard reassured Ivan's doubts. Those in charge at the state penitentiary have agreed to pardon these prisoners for, let's just say, completing a good deed for the community. In lieu of serving the 6 months for which they've been sentenced, they will spend 1 month in the haunted castle. Of course, they will be under our supervision. This also means that if anything horrid does happen, we can blame the prisoners and expose them to the media. Except for their families, very few people have a soft heart for convicts. Pausing, Leonard leaned forward and smiled confidently. We can't lose. Even though Ivan was a bit unsure of the whole idea, Leonard still got his approval in the end. Although they advertised widely, they were unable to find enough volunteers, so they decided to use Leonard's Plan B. On the list were 7 prisoners: Karen, Wendy, Spence, Damien, Luke, Owen, and Vincent. Knowing Ivan's reluctance, Leonard decided he would bring his pistol for protection. Ivan agreed to the plan, as it would give them the upper hand if the prisoners decided to mutiny. Leonard and Ivan arrived at the island where the castle was located a few days before the prisoners. They had to get the generators running, food put away, beds set up, and run the surveillance wires. When the boat with the prisoners arrived, Leonard and Ivan were ready to start. While the prisoners were putting their personal items away in their bedrooms, Vincent came to the front door carrying an envelope. Here. He shoved the envelope at Leonard. This is the permission form from my mom. Dumbfounded, as all of the permission slips had already been arranged, Leonard took the sealed envelope from Vincent. Certainly, he replied nonchalantly. Thank you. The rest of the group was already gathering in the front room, so he quickly went and slipped the envelope inside Vincent's file. Leonard wondered what Vincent's mom was doing. He did not need permission from the prisoners' guardians, as they were all adults. Next, Leonard and Ivan gave the group a tour of the entire place, including the underground dungeon. At dinner that night, the group sat down in the enormous dining hall. The table was long enough to easily hold an army. The castle was devoid of much furniture and even echoed at times when everyone tried to talk. The prisoners were intrigued by their task and asked Leonard and Ivan numerous questions. Aren't you afraid we'll try to escape? I mean, you don't really have any security around here. Damien spoke brashly, looking around at his fellow prisoners with a smirk, but Leonard took a long, cold-hearted look at him and responded solemnly, I could honestly care less if you try to escape. Where are you going to go? You are on an island in the middle of nowhere. In fact, no one knows you're here except for us. He stared at Damien with his piercing eyes. If you think you can escape by swimming to the mainland, think again. The waters are too treacherous, you would die. If you think you could just live off the land here on the island, you would starve to death long before you found anything or anybody. He leaned back, folding his arms across his chest and curling his lips into a smile. And the food we serve here is far better than at any prison. That got all of their attention. Obviously, they would much rather be living at a haunted castle than at a jailhouse. That first night, the guests protested when the lights were dimmed down, making the rooms look dark and gloomy. But the scientists had decided that it was the best way to bring out the spirits. "After all," Ivan explained, "our darkness may be a poltergeist's light." Over time, they each mentioned that they had heard voices, ones that did not belong to any of them. This went on for a while. However, as they were staying in a very old castle, Ivan and Leonard always reassured them that the voices they had heard were merely a castle's typical creaks and cracks. Sometimes the fire in the fireplaces created shadows and figures that none of the guests thought belonged to them. Vincent was the quietest one out of the group. He did not always explore the castle with everyone, yet was always there for supper. He liked to keep to himself. As the entire castle was under surveillance, he was never truly alone. Ivan and Leonard had set up a back room with surveillance equipment so as to monitor the guests when they went to sleep. They kept a sharp eye out for any strange occurrences. Everything went smoothly the first week, but when the second week began, the scientists started paying close attention to Vincent's behavior. He would talk to himself in his sleep and had started to sleepwalk, sometimes walking right out of the castle. Vincent started complaining about getting cold chills. He even quietly confessed to the group that he had a growing desire to want to hurt people. Vincent's confession scared the others. They approached the scientists, demanding Vincent be handcuffed and taken away from the castle and the island. Leonard and Ivan decided to confine Vincent to his room. They explained to the rest of the group that for the sake of the experiment, they could not allow anyone to leave. In truth, there was no way to communicate to the outside world. There was no way to radio for help if something went wrong. The scientists had set the experiment up so no one would know the events that went on at the castle. In fact, only when the month was up would a chartered boat come to transport everyone back to the mainland. One thing was for certain: no one went near Vincent. During dinner time, he would just sit at his place and stare at them. His skin was becoming pale. It was whispered that he was coming down with a disease. When the scientists visited his room, he spoke of things he knew would frighten the others. He admitted to them, "I can't eat cooked foods anymore. I can't stand it. It does nothing for me. I can't eat something that's already dead. My body needs to absorb something living. I need to feast in the moment. If the blood is already coagulated. No, if it's already cold. It's too late." Leonard tried to reassure him. "You're just being delusional. Perhaps you have food poisoning or some other issue, but you are not turning crazed. There's nothing wrong with you other than you had something bad to eat." "Nothing's wrong," Vincent shouted out. Desperate now, he yanked up his sleeves and showed them his arms. Strangely, they looked like they had second-degree burns. In fact, when the scientists looked closer, his arms appeared to have signs of some third-degree burns. "Does this look like nothing is wrong? When we were outside yesterday, this is what the sun did to me. It wasn't even 5 minutes. My blood felt like it was boiling. Remember how I ran back inside? I splashed water on my arms and it felt like acid. I'm finding out that I despise anything sacred or holy, yet I can't explain why. It feels as if they cut through me like a knife. What's happening to me?" Ivan attempted to hide his fear, but did not do a very good job. As calmly as he could, he looked at Vincent and said gently, "Why don't we figure out what to do tomorrow? Tonight, we will board up your windows and barricade your room as a safety precaution. This will keep you and everyone else safe until we know what is happening." As soon as they left Vincent's room and returned to their surveillance room, Ivan looked at Leonard very seriously. He checked the door to make sure it was locked and then looked around the room. Finally, Ivan whispered very carefully, "We have Leonard just laughed at the thought, not able to take Ivan seriously. Then he looked Ivan in the eye and asked, "Kill him? Why? Because he's sick? We can lock him in his room if you think it's contagious, but killing him is out of the question." Ivan shook his head and responded in a raspy voice,
"Stop playing dumb. You know why we have to kill him. He's transforming. Doesn't he look a little like a vampire?"
"That doesn't make him a vampire," Leonard countered. "He just suffers from vampirism, the belief in vampires. We know very well they don't exist. I do think he believes he is a vampire, but that doesn't mean we should end his life. Let's just board up his room so he doesn't put himself or anyone else in danger. Tomorrow we'll determine what's wrong." After dinner, they made a sweep of Vincent's room to make sure there was nothing in there that would hurt him. Ivan discovered a journal under Vincent's mattress. He took it and hid it in his jacket without saying a word. The scientists boarded up Vincent's window, locked him inside, and barricaded the door. Back in their surveillance room, Ivan pulled out Vincent's journal and started reading it out loud to Leonard. They were dismayed to discover that Vincent had written about being institutionalized several times for mental problems. Their background check had not revealed this fact because it had been erased from his record after he turned 18. At that point, they got out Vincent's file and went over it. With sinking hearts, both of the scientists realized they had overlooked something. They discovered a few notes hinting that Vincent had experienced a series of mental problems as a youth. Then, they finally opened the sealed envelope that Vincent had given them. It was a letter from Vincent's mother. The lights flickered strangely, sometimes enveloping the room in darkness. It was as if the shadows from the room were trying to hide the words in the letter. Leonard read it out loud.
"To whomever reads this, my son is not crazy. I have seen the spirits gather around him. They don't seem to let him be at peace. He has such paranoia that it makes it very easy for a poltergeist to possess him. That is why I have kept him closed off from the world all these years. Any spirit with ill will and intent to do harm can take over the faint of heart. The weaker someone's power is, the easier it is to be taken over. If you are reading this, and he has already been taken, then may he show you mercy and a quick death. A mother should never say this, but if it comes to it, end his life. It would be better than the unsilenced screams he will bring into this world."
Leonard placed the letter back in Vincent's file. They were both quiet, deep in thought. Leonard got up and walked a few steps away from Ivan, slowly turning back around. "This is it! Our time to shine! All our days and research as unknown scientists are nothing compared to this moment in time. Vincent is going to make us famous beyond belief."
"What are you talking about?" Ivan asked, stunned. "What you are saying is borderline madness. Are you implying that not only is Vincent possessed, but he has been taken over by a vampire poltergeist as well?"
"Of course," Leonard declared. As the days passed, things only got worse and worse as Vincent only grew hungrier and hungrier. He spoke to the scientists again about his increasing desire to hurt people. After studying his mannerisms, Leonard and Ivan decided that they needed to do something. They explained to Vincent that for the safety of everyone in the castle, he would need to be chained up. Vincent agreed. He would now be confined to his room at all times and in chains. One night in particular, there was a storm raging outside the castle. The winds were roaring through the cracks in the walls and windows. At times it blew out any lights that were on inside. The scientists, Leonard and Ivan, were visiting Vincent in his room. He looked more grimacing and horrid than ever. Vincent could not eat normal food anymore. He was getting ill and weak. His eyes were bloodshot, and his sharp fangs looked desperate to tear away at flesh. Finally, Ivan spoke up.
"We have to abort this experiment. Send everyone back to prison. I can't handle this anymore. I'm not going to allow someone to starve to death."
Vincent did not know why, but when he saw the scientists' panic and fear and their pulse rise up frantically, he felt eased.
To death.
He asked in a low undertone.
I am already deceased. This is why I can speak to the dead. If you want to see the full test of my power, then let me go.
What? And lose all the data we've been trying to research? We may never discover anything like this again, Leonard exclaimed. I don't think so. This isn't about disproving the existence of ghosts anymore. This is about a real-life vampire encounter. If we can show hard evidence of this, we stand to make a fortune. Ivan could not take it any longer. He jumped up and grabbed Leonard by the collar. Have you gone mad? Endangering people's lives was never part of the plan. At that very moment, Vincent broke from the chains that bound him. Shocked, Ivan tried to make a run for it. As he scrambled to get out of the room, Leonard calmly took out the pistol from inside his jacket and shot Ivan in the back of the leg. Ivan screamed and then fell down, wincing and sobbing. Leonard's face was expressionless as he looked down at Ivan. As excruciating pain rose up in Ivan's eyes, Leonard spoke in a calm, authoritative voice over his cries and moans. How wrong you are, my friend. There are always sacrifices to be made for everything that is achieved in life. Leonard then looked over at Vincent and added, In fact, I think you should be this vampire's first sacrifice. I'm sure our Vincent is strong enough by now to easily rip your limbs off, piece by agonizing piece. Ivan was trying to scamper away like a wounded animal and too terrified to ask Leonard what he was doing. In his frightened mind, he was just instinctively trying to escape. But as Vincent's figure moved through the darkened room, Ivan stopped struggling as his eyes were filled with the wings that had spawned from Vincent's body. Ivan's eyes were huge, his mouth opened as he tried to turn to look at Leonard. He seemed as if he was going to say something, but Vincent's hand swooped down and tore into his chest like a dagger. As Vincent's swiftly digging hand pierced Ivan's beating heart, he intoned,
At last, supper time has arrived.
Ivan stayed alive long enough to witness Vincent's figure distort and become a giant vampire bat. Before he could even let out a shriek, the bat's sharp-toothed mouth enclosed his head, biting it off completely. The walls were showered in scarlet. When it looked as if Vincent was done feasting, Leonard approached him. You know, even a being with the longevity of a vampire can die off pretty quickly when they have nothing to eat. Vincent turned to Leonard as he slowly shifted back to his human form, the crimson running and dripping down his mouth and fingers. He spoke easily now, as his belly had been filled.
But I have all of you I can still feast on.
Leonard calmly raised his eyebrows and looked Vincent firmly in the eyes. But then where would you be? There's no way off this island, especially for a vampire. It's too far to the mainland to fly, and you already know what the water does to you. Vincent looked at Leonard as if he was a bothersome insect. He reached over and started scraping his sharp claws on the stone wall of the castle. In a harsh undertone, he growled,
Then what is your suggestion?
Allow me to study you and your existence. In return, I promise to supply you with plenty of livestock. I could easily turn this castle into a tourist resort. Leonard paused, a grim smile on his face. Every year there are people who go on vacation to faraway countries and never come back, at least alive. For now, Vincent liked Leonard's proposal and decided he had no other alternative but to concede. He helped Leonard get rid of the remains of Ivan's body. While they were performing this task, they came up with a plan to excuse Ivan's absence. The storm had been rather nasty during the night, so Ivan's screams had merely been the wind howling and blowing through the castle walls. If someone in the group said something about a shot being fired, Leonard would just tell them it was a flare gun, that he thought he saw a rescue chopper. The next morning, Leonard told the group that he feared Ivan had gone off into the woods and gotten lost. In a place this vast, the story was believable. Still, Karen and Spence questioned him as to why they never saw Vincent. They complained that he was never around for any of their meals or outside with them during the day. Karen reported that she thought she saw a figure outside sometimes at night, but Leonard dismissed it by explaining it must have been a shadow. One night, Karen just could not sleep at all, and so she got up to go get a glass of water. As she was walking through one of the castle halls, she saw that Wendy was up as well. She said hello to her, but got no answer. She called again, and still there was no answer. As Karen got closer, she saw that Wendy just had a blank stare. Thinking that Wendy was sleepwalking, Karen tried to wake her up, only to be pushed aside. She walked right past Karen and into one of the darkened hallways. Concerned, Karen went and woke up the others. They started searching for Wendy in the hallway where Karen had last seen her. Wendy was walking right up to Vincent when they spotted her. Karen, Damien, Luke, Owen, and Spence sighed with relief for a moment. But that expression soon turned to pure horror when they realized that Vincent's hands had become claws. While Vincent serenely used his claws to slit Wendy's throat, she stared helplessly at the group, powerless to fight back as her clothes were painted scarlet. Vincent began to feast on her blood. Now it was all too clear what had happened. Wendy had not been sleepwalking at all, but had been hypnotized by Vincent. In the middle of Vincent's feeding frenzy, he suddenly looked up at his audience. He smiled at them, his lips and fangs coated and dripping with Wendy's blood. Now they knew. Wendy's fate was already sealed. All life had escaped her. For everyone else, the only thing that entered their minds was to run. Before they could escape the castle, Vincent was outside, levitating over it. The group stood together, holding each other and shaking at the castle doorway, not daring to leave it. Vincent had begun to summon his minions. Not everyone knows that vampires can awaken the dead. Apparently, no one in this particular group knew that either. Karen, Damien, Luke, Owen, and Spence were spellbound. Their eyes could not bear to witness what they were seeing. Hands, feet, torsos, and heads clawed and broke their way out of the ground. It seemed as if Vincent had a legion of zombies at his disposal. Vincent was now on the ground, walking slowly towards the group. As the shadows moved around him, his eyes focused on Karen in particular. He spoke in a sinister voice.
Seems like everyone likes to listen to you. I think I shall let you decide the fate of your friends. You can either run out here and let my army dissect you one by one, or you can stay here in the castle and allow yourselves to be my victims.
Frantic and scared, Karen shouted defiantly.
What's the difference? We're dead either way!
I am more merciful than my minions, I assure you. If you choose to stay with me, I promise a quick death. I only need to feast once a week to sustain myself, but if you choose to come outside, my legion will devour each of you slowly.
The two choices were not much to think over. But after a short while, Karen, Damien, Luke, Owen, and Spence decided it was best to stay in the castle. Of course, Leonard was there as well. This gave Vincent 6 weeks of food. They decided that if one of them were able to survive the entire 6 weeks before meeting their demise, this would provide them with more time to plot a way of escaping the island. For now, the group stayed in the castle, always petrified of the shadows that wandered the walls, wondering if Vincent was ready for his next meal.